Recently, I've been working on a series of videos that explore collecting the remaining achievements and 100%ing games from my childhood. When picking a game for these videos, I think on what the most influential games are to my personal taste in stories and gameplay. With this criteria, I couldn't think of a better game to do next but Bioshock. Bioshock is a beloved game by many, developed and released all the way back in 2007. Alright, I'll just turn to Ash now, I guess. From the day it came out, people knew that it was truly something special, with a great game premise backing it and an even greater story. After over 17 years, it is time for us to get back to Rapture to finally 100% this game. Thankfully, we don't have that many achievements left to collect. Of the 51 available, we are only missing 17, one for every year since the game came out. Along with this, many of these achievements actually build into each other. To get one, you have to get the others. This makes it a bit easier to work through them. So, let's get started with the first achievement we were able to unlock, Skilled Hacker. Skilled Hacker. The first achievement I was able to unlock was Skilled Hacker. One that I expected us to take much longer on, if I'm honest. I wasn't exactly sure how long it would take in order to get 50 hacks, and just tried to hack as many things as possible without keeping track of them in any way. The first hour or so didn't have anything to hack, sadly, but once we get access to the flying turrets, the security bots, that's when we really get working on this achievement. Pipe game after pipe game after pipe game, I went through making sure I found as many hackable objects as possible. Doing this, I was expecting to really have to lock in and get as many hacks as possible. But thankfully, after not too long, we were able to unlock Skilled Hacker for 40 gamer score. Moving forward in these videos, I want to talk about the experience of getting the achievement and how I feel about them in a critical sense. With this, I will also be adding them to a running achievement tier list. This is just an easy way to communicate how I feel about an achievement that I have collected in this journey to 100% all the games from my childhood. With that being said, let's talk about Skilled Hacker with a bit of a critical eye. This is definitely one of those achievements that attempts to encourage the player to explore a piece of the game the developers want them to explore. It is an achievement that could easily be a bit of a time sink, but thankfully, it was much quicker than I expected. However, being made to play 50 games of pipes isn't great. The minigame used for hacking is just way too long to be worth it. Typically, I would attempt to hack a handful of safes and just destroy everything else in our way, but playing for this achievement definitely put me in the mindset of hacking everything that I could, and to think it was for the worse. Most of the time, hacking isn't worthwhile, and using auto-hack tools is a much better option when it's available. Even though I don't think this achievement is as painful to get as some of the others in the series, it's still not a great one. It's going to go into C tier, but just barely. Another thing I want to start doing is trying to redesign the achievements that get an especially bad ranking. Anything C tier and below, I think, excluding ones that I just outright would cut. This is one that I think could be a bit better while accomplishing what I suspect was the goal of this achievement. Skilled Hacker, I would think, is being used as a way to encourage the player to explore using the hacking mechanic to get a feel for it and to encourage its use. I do think a small change will both achieve this goal to a greater degree and will also be much less of a headache to unlock. And I need to remind everyone, just because something takes a long time to unlock, doesn't mean it's an actual challenge. The goal for this rework is to accomplish the same goal as the original, but in a nicer way. This won't magically make this an S tier achievement though. That being said, Skilled Hacker. Successfully hack a camera, a security bot, a stationary turret, a safe, and a vending machine. This changes the focus from simply hacking a bunch of stuff into showing the player all the various things that can be hacked. Even with this change, I do still think that this is a C tier achievement, but like a high C. Now, the issue with this rework is there are already individual achievements for every single one of these actions. I think this is way overkill, and these should be smushed together into one achievement that covers them all. Fully researched nitro splicer. Since there was an achievement where I needed to fully max out all research possible, fully researched nitro splicer was just a step in that process. You don't get the camera until you are past the first couple areas of the game. But once we got our hands on it, we made the best of it. Every chance we possibly had, we made sure to take pictures of every nitro splicer we ran across, risking death to try and get our perfect shots. When doing this, it's always best to try and get the action shots. This is just animations where the target is attacking. It's also best to try and get multiple subjects though. Thankfully, there are some gene tonics that increase the amount of research that you get for each photo, which helped with this endeavor. There isn't much else to say about this one. Get the shots, try not to die, and you'll eventually get it. Unlocking, fully research the nitro splicer. Of the bunch I needed to research, this one was unlocked first. I'm assuming because it was one of the first enemy types after we get the camera. As for how we are going to go about ranking this achievement in our tier list, we should look at what exactly this achievement is asking for us and ask a few questions that we need to ask with all achievements. Let me just say ask one more time. 1. Is this an actual challenge worth being called an achievement? Is this an actual challenge that should be rewarded? 2. Does this achievement change how you would normally play the game? And 3. Is the achievement unique when compared to the rest of the game? With fully researched nitro splicer, it's easy to say that this achievement can be a challenge to get. You need to balance getting good shots and, well, staying alive. In order to get this achievement, you need to purposely put yourself in a lot of danger. This can distract on a first playthrough if you are focusing too much on unlocking this, but I do think it can be a good addition in a second playthrough. This goes directly into the idea of changing how the player plays the game, and yes, it does. It can be for good and it can be for bad, but along with changing how the player plays, it also rewards the player for this, with a small periodic upgrades to damage against the subject enemies. 4.3, this achievement loses itself. There are 9 different achievements that all culminate in completing Research PhD, which requires the player to max out all possible research. If there was a couple achievements for this, I could still rank this one pretty high, but with Research PhD covering the same requirements and the other 8 covering very similar stuff, this falls lower and lower down the chart until eventually landing in the fuck you tier. No rework for this one. Fully researched Houdini splicer. This is another achievement that requires us to use the camera that was gifted to us to fully research an enemy within the game. Once getting the camera, we can start work once again in researching Houdini splicers, who in all aspects can be quite difficult to capture on film. This is because, well, they teleport. You don't have a lot of time to get out your camera and actually take the shots that you need to get the research that you need. Thankfully, this does make it a little easier to get action shots though, since they are constantly trying to kill us. Taking shot after shot, and we'll eventually get our last and unlock fully researched Houdini splicer for a simple 10 gamer score. As with the last research-based achievement, fully researched Houdini splicer, despite there actually being some good things going for this achievement, the oversaturation of these kinds of achievements definitely drags this one down, kicking and screaming all the way to fuck you tier. Ammo Inventor. Did you know you can craft ammo in Bioshock? I completely forgot about this aspect of this game. But Ammo Inventor had me exploring this mechanic for better or worse. The thing about Ammo Inventor is that you aren't actually able to unlock it until pretty late into the game. You first need to unlock every available weapon and every ammo type for those weapons. This is just done by playing through the game. You don't have to do anything to unlock them, but each level is, in a way, leveled. The later areas have stronger and stronger enemies, as well as giving you more and more tools. This achievement was unlocked the moment I remembered I needed to unlock it when I was in the late game. A quick visit to a U-Invent vendor, and I unlocked Ammo Inventor for 25 gamer score. I struggle with how I should rank this one. On one hand, I do think it's good to push the player to try out all the different mechanics, but on the other side, it's really not difficult at all. You just have to get to the endgame and collect loot, but without having to really try to do anything. It just eventually happens as you play. I don't think it's fuck you tier, but it's nearly a nothing tier. I'm gonna go ahead and put it in C tier for now. Weapons Specialist. For our next achievement, we're actually going to cover a handful of achievements that all pretty much cover the exact same things. These are the X fully upgraded weapons. X being 3, 4, 5, and finally Weapons Specialist. I have already unlocked the first two of these achievements, but in order to unlock all of them, we need to find a total of 12 Power to the People stations, each weapon having 2 upgrades each. I'm actually surprised I never unlocked this when growing up. I was definitely the type of player that would spend an extreme amount of time searching in levels for everything I could. The Power to the People stations aren't even that hidden and could easily be picked up. You will find 1 in Neptune's Bounty, Arcadia, the Farmer's Market, 2 in Fort Frolic, 2 more in Hephaestus, 2 in Olympus Heights, another in Apollo Square, and the final 2 in Point Prometheus. The upgrades themselves aren't really anything to write home about. Since the difficulty of the enemies will increase the later you get into the game, these upgrades feel necessary to keep up with the difficulty curve. This makes the game difficulty feel more static than I would have liked. Splicers in later levels have a lot more health and do more damage than earlier ones, but you also do more damage and have more health in later levels. If you go back to the old areas, you do feel sufficiently powerful, but there is little to no reason to go back to the old levels. It's a bit of a nothing mechanic if I'm honest. Once you get the 12th and final upgrade, you unlock Weapon Specialist for 20 gamer score, and on the way to doing this, I unlocked 5 fully upgraded weapons for 10 gamer score, four fully upgraded weapons for another 10 gamer score, and finally 3 fully upgraded weapons for another 10 gamer score, for a total of 50. Now, if you have been paying attention with how I feel about achievements, you can probably guess how I feel about these ones. Although I think the upgrade system of Bioshock isn't very good, I do think the Weapon Specialist is a fine achievement. By itself, I would have placed it in B tier. The unfortunate thing is that there are 5 redundant achievements to get along with this one. Using achievement tracking for the final achievement would have been a much better way to track your progress in upgrading every weapon. Due to the redundancy of them all, I'm moving Weapon Specialist to C tier, and all the others to nothing tier. Hopefully you can understand the reasoning for that, but if you think I'm being a little too harsh, do tell me below. Found Cohen's Room. Finding Cohen's Room is a little bit of an Easter egg. It requires you to not kill in a game that you have been killing every single person in for several hours now. Worry not though, as this isn't going to be a permanent state to Cohen. What we had to do was, once we were recruited by Cohen to finish his greatest masterpiece, we hunt down his 4 students, taking each of their pictures and placing them upon the massive statue on the stage. Cohen himself will be joining you as he walks down the stairs with a bit of dramatic flourish, rewarding you for your efforts. As he admires your work, you leave him be and continue your hunt for Andrew Ryan.
It is accomplished. Let me see it.
Soon enough though, you will find yourself in the home of Cohen, and watch as 2 splicers are dancing on his command. Of course, being the massive critics of art that we are, we find this an unacceptable performance and end it permanently, pissing off Cohen, who will come down from his room and attack us. Thankfully, he isn't much of a challenge, but once we head upstairs to raid his room, we will unlock Found Cohen's Room for an easy 10 gamer score. As before, we should talk about this achievement's placement in the achievement tier list. Often, I'm disappointed by the seemingly lack of any effort that achievements get in older video games. Thankfully, this is not one of those times. Now, I doubt very much that this alternative encounter was planned specifically for an achievement, but that doesn't really take away from the achievement for me. The player has entered Sandra Cohen's personal quarters, and that's it. It doesn't hint at how it can be done, when it can be done, but it simply states that it can be done. It's one of those achievements that hints to the player that there is a cool interaction that they can search for if they'd like to. I'm under no delusion that most people unlock this naturally though. I know that most people used a guide or were spoiled on how to get this. Hell, I did it here in this video myself. But to me, it's still a good example of how achievements can be used to point a player into an interesting direction. I would have loved to see more of these achievements like this one, but sadly this is the only one in this game. That doesn't take away from this one, mind you. With all that being said, it's quite a simple achievement. Not changing how the player plays the entire game, but changing how they might handle a specific character. We are going to be placing this in A tier. Great job, Bioshock. You got one. Maxed all tracks. Maxed all tracks had me really stressing out. The entire playthrough I was hyper focused on making sure I did not accidentally screw myself over with this one. Throughout the playthrough I had to save the little sisters, and doing this will net you slightly less Adam by the end of the game. It's barely noticeable, but it did have me worried enough that I purposely avoided buying new and upgraded plasmids, opting to instead buy any slot upgrades as they became available. I do think I was a little over-conservative with this, but due to another achievement requiring me to unlock every single tonic in the same playthrough, this was a bit of a chore rather than a reward for upgrading my character. Unfortunately, with how things unlock in this game from vending machines, you won't even know if you saved enough Adam until close to the end of the game. Thankfully I did, and at one of the last Gatherer's Gardens, I got my final slot upgrade, unlocking maxed all tracks for 50 gamer score. As for its placement on the achievement tier list, I don't think it's a very interesting achievement, but it is a simple reward when playing casually for upgrading your character. I don't actually think it's a bad achievement though, just a bit of a boring one sadly. Without having too much else to say, C tier. On to the next one. Research PhD. We talked a bit about Research PhD earlier, but we will quickly talk about it again here. So Research PhD will have the player running around the game getting action shots of every single enemy type in the game. This includes things like cameras, turrets, little sisters, splicers, and even big daddies. Now I do know that some people really didn't enjoy this feature, but I found it to be an interesting game challenge more than anything. This is due to the camera actually being treated like a weapon within the game. It's not a photo mode that pauses the gameplay. Rather, you are whipping out a camera in the middle of the action, trying your best to get as many action shots as possible. Towards the end, I was actually getting a bit sick of this game loop though, and would often just spam the camera at the start of any fights until the grade of the shots were too low to give me any experience points. With a little iteration on the mechanic, I do think this could have been a really interesting addition to the game. Maybe pairing it with some stealth mechanics to allow 2 stages of gameplay. One, where you are sneaking around with a camera gathering information on your targets, such as their weapons and behaviors or weaknesses, and a second where you act on this knowledge. With its current iteration, it just acts as a little more than a damage buff here and there, rather than amounting to any significant gameplay changes. I did find myself playing very differently when hunting this achievement though. I seemed much more conscious about looking for specific enemy targets to complete. In fact, I almost missed this achievement because I'd forgotten to take pictures of turrets and cameras. I was too focused on hacking them, and they were some of the very last enemies I needed to capture. In the end though, we were able to complete all the research we needed and unlock Research PhD for 20 gamer score. I'm not surprised in the slightest to see that this one is a rare achievement. When placing this one on our tier list, we do have to consider all the achievements in the game. This helps inform us how one would actually go about to unlock this one. With Research PhD, there are an unfortunate number of sub-achievements that are tied directly with unlocking this one. In some ways, this can be good. The player wouldn't have to guess what they have and haven't fully researched yet, but this quickly breaks if they aren't able to nab them all in one go. This can actually hurt the experience of the player, as there isn't any other way to track progress towards this achievement in-game. By itself, I would have put Research PhD in B tier. If it had a proper way to track its progress, it might have made its way even up to A tier. But when we take into account everything else surrounding this achievement, I do not see how we can put it in anything higher than C tier. Let me know if you agree or think it should be higher or lower. I really don't know if I made the correct decision with this one. Tonic Collector. Oh great, we have to talk about Tonic Collector. So, Tonic Collector. Where do we even start? Tonic Collector has had me stressed out about both searching every little spot in the game without any way to track if I had collected every tonic in the area, as well as having to manage my atom in a very specific way to make sure I had enough to buy every tonic that I came across in Gatherer's Gardens. My strategy for this started out by simply going through the level and collecting all the audio logs and any loose weapons, ammo, and of course tonics that I could find. Then I would hopefully be geared up enough to take on the big daddies of the level and collect the atom from the little sisters. Only then would I get to the Gatherer's Garden and buy tonics and tonic slot upgrades, pretty much ignoring anything else. In the beginning, I wasn't even exactly sure what counted as a tonic. Were plasmids counted in this total? What about health and Eve upgrades? They aren't, by the way, but there is nothing in game that tells you that. The absolute worst part of this process though, was that there are apparently tonics that you can miss and never be able to go back to without an old save or starting a new game. Again, with how the game works, you will have zero information on if you did in fact collect them all till nearly the end of the game, where hopefully the achievement pops. Thankfully for us, it did. After hours of only ever being kind of sure, we unlocked Tonic Collector for 50 gamer score. There are over 53 of these fuckers in the game, by the way. 53! And you have zero tracking of any kind. Tonic Collector is an obvious fuck you tier, and I won't be hearing anything else to the contrary. Historian. You thought Tonic Collector was bad? There are 53 fucking tonics that you need to collect without any way in game to track them. Well, double that and a bit more, because there are a whopping 122 audio diaries in Bioshock, with no way in game to track them. I cannot tell you how long it takes to collect all of these, even with multiple maps, some of which were just wrong, thanks IGN. This still took a ridiculous amount of time to finish. The only minor saving grace is that there is a list of audio logs in your journal that you can cross-reference to a known list outside the game. But wait, the list order in-game is based on when you picked up the audio logs, so there's no consistency between lists. Do you know what that means? That means you have to count by hand how many you have in an area, and if you are missing one, you'll have to individually check each name to a known list. This is, of course, only if the game actually puts them in the correct list, because guess what? There is a bug that can have an audio log be put into the wrong list in-game. I cannot express the amount of annoyance that is this achievement. Casually, the audio logs are great. They add so much to the world and lore, and each follow a specific person. They are well written and are very easy to follow story-wise. They are placed in sensible locations even. It's just everything else that makes collecting them is an absolute mess. A simple tracker that said, hey, you collected all the audio logs in this area, would have been an absolute game changer when it comes to this achievement. After collecting the last and final one, after stumbling through Rapture, you unlock Historian for 50 gamer score. Historian is fuck you tier and would be lower if it existed. Avid Inventor. You know, I'm seeing a trend with these final achievements. Avid Inventor has the player successfully inventing, crafting 100 items. On paper, this seems like a pretty typical achievement. I went through the game and made sure I collected as much random loot that I could. I would occasionally craft some ammo here and there, and maybe a hacking tool. We eventually got close to the end of the game, where I basically just spent all the random loot that I have collected on as many items as I could craft, prioritizing the cheapest costing ones. By this late in the game, I'm sure I have enough loot to easily get this achievement. Right? Wrong. Apparently not even close. Not that I would know, as there is no way to see how many items you have crafted. Alright, not the end of the world. Let's just go back to older levels and farm up some enemies. We gotta be close, right? So that's what we do. For the next 2 hours, I run around Rapture, killing any splicer or Big Daddy we come across. And to be honest, there were not a lot. Surely by now we have enough though. Heading back to a U-Invent, we craft everything that we can, and still, no achievement pop. Still, no way to know how close we are to the achievement. Reluctantly, we use Google to figure out how to get this achievement. We try a few methods to try and cheese it, but none of them work. I suspect that they do work, but only in specific versions of this game. So, we move on. Eventually, we do stumble across a farming method that does work. We find ourselves in Arcadia, past the farmer's market in the Silver Wing Apiary. Apparently the game never stops spawning splicers when you open containers in this room, and you can keep farming them. So we take the time to do such. Every half hour or so, heading back to a U-Invent to craft as many items as we can. Eventually, after who knows how long, we unlock Avid Inventor for 10 whole gamer score. Yep, 10. What a treat. The issue with Avid Inventor is that you are required to make 100 items. I strongly suspect that this 100 number was pulled straight from someone's ass though, as you are never going to naturally craft 100 items by the end of the game. I was at the last U-Invent in the game, scavenging everything I could possibly collect and then some, and still did not get this achievement by the end of the game. I think 100 was just a nice round number that sounded nice, and they just assumed players would be able to reach that. This is why I talk about these achievements. A lot of us find great joy in collecting them. They can offer unique ways to play the game and interesting stories to tell others. They can be a way to show off, and to show that you have gotten everything you could from a game. Then you have achievements like this, a frustrating, poorly designed mechanic that is only here to get players to explore a shitty part of their game. Fuck you tier. I was thinking about how I would rework this achievement, and it's very simple. Change the 100 items requirement to one of each type that can be crafted. If the goal of this achievement is to introduce it to players, this can easily be accomplished with this change. You wouldn't even have to worry about players getting this super early in the game, as what is craftable is slowly unlocked as the player goes through the game. Little Sister Savior. So I actually got the final 3 achievements all at the same time due to them all having to do with beating the game in a specific way. Thankfully, they were not mutually exclusive ways. That being said, there will probably be some overlap in what I talk about. For Little Sister Savior, I need to save every little sister in the game. Not just the ones that you come across, mind you, all of them. So to do this I needed to pay attention to be sure I collect the little sisters at the end of playing through a level. Thankfully, Big Daddies are only hostile once you attack them, and leaving them for last to make sure that you are maxed out on ammo and firepower. Throughout the game, there were about 2 to 3 little sisters that needed saving per level. Thankfully, the game gives you a super easy way to track whether or not you have saved all the little sisters in a level. A tracker for a collectible? What a fucking concept! For me, I only really had trouble with a few Big Daddies in the very beginning. Once you recognize how they attack, it's pretty easy to exploit their behaviors though, even on the hardest difficulty. You do get a tiny bit less Atom when you save them versus harvesting them, but this difference is offset by the many gifts that are left to the players after saving a specific amount of sisters. These gifts will be left at the Gatherer's Gardens, nearest to where the most recent sister was saved. Don't worry, they are very hard to miss. Once we finish the final fight with Fontaine, the achievement popped for us for a great 100 gamer score. You also get the good ending cutscene for this. A very strange cutscene that feels a bit out of place if I'm honest, and maybe a bit forced. When it comes to ranking Little Sister Savior, the thing that brings down this achievement is the mechanic of harvesting versus saving. This idea is a little more than flavor text within the game. On paper, harvesting would be like taking the shortcuts in life and being immoral in a setting that rewards power. In practice, saving versus harvesting offers basically no mechanical differences. Due to the gifts, you usually end up with just the same amount of Atom by the end of the game. Harvesting little sisters gives you Atom, saving them gives you less, but gifts make up the difference for saving them. This pretty much makes the choice to harvest or save them completely meaningless. Also, if you are paying attention to the story, I do think the writers intended the player to save the little sisters as they help you later in the game, no matter how many of them you have saved or harvested. I think this achievement would be much better if it was treated almost like a challenge run, giving you no Atom for saving little sisters, or at least very little. This would make the player have a much more difficult time when deciding whether or not to harvest little sisters, as Atom controls most upgrades including your health. There should also be a pretty steep price you would have to pay for harvesting the little sisters. Maybe you don't get the little sisters' help to finish off Fontaine, and have to do a much longer boss battle. Something like that. I'm sure I could spend a ton of time coming up with good alternatives that would serve the game better. For now though, it's time to rank this achievement. In principle, I would rank it A tier. In practice, with what we talked about in mind, it's C tier. I really want to know what you think about this one. How would you improve the harvest versus save mechanic? Seriously Good at This. Seriously Good at This sees us playing the game at the hardest difficulty. The thing about this is that Bioshock is an extremely easy game. Even with not the greatest controls for a first-person shooter, if you have played any FPS for any amount of time, you won't have a hard time getting this one. It baffles me that only 6% of players have this. I think due to the horror atmosphere that Bioshock gets just perfectly, people remember this game being much harder than it is. I think in the entire playthrough we died less than 5 times, and I'm sure I'll do the world's shortest death montage here to show that. I do think you are able to get this one in New Game Plus even, which only makes the game easier. If you haven't played the game in a bit, definitely give this achievement a go. You'd be surprised by how easy you can get it. Unlocking this after beating the game netted us 40 gamer score. As for its ranking, I do think this is a bit of a classic achievement that most games should have. Bioshock even does something uncommon in not offering achievements for every single difficulty like most games do. bonus points for Bioshock. I'd be happy with putting this achievement in either A tier or a high B tier. For now, let's go with a low A tier. But I could be convinced otherwise with a good argument. Brass balls. We got brass balls right alongside with seriously good at this, and to be completely honest, I didn't even notice a difference in how I played. Brass balls has us turning off a mechanic in Bioshock called Vita Chambers. Vita Chambers is the game's explanation on how the player can have multiple lives in the game. Not saved games, but multiple lives. What this mechanic does is that it revives the player while keeping all the damage the player has dealt to enemies intact. If you were to disable this for a new player from the very beginning, they would never have known it was a mechanic. Again, the game is just too easy to warrant this. It's like training wheels for baby's first FPS. I do think that this makes the game much more approachable to new players or casual gamers though. It's just not something I need or missed in this playthrough. They're also not very well implemented in the game world story, as there is only one audio recording that I can remember that even addresses them directly. They're also not used to revive any bosses or enemies in the game. In fact, there are dozens of ways that I can think of to make them an interesting part of Bioshock that just goes unexplored. This would suggest that their inclusion might have been a very late one. My suggestion? Turn them off. Save more often and you won't even notice that they are missing. After beating the game with never using one, we get another 100 gamer score. I think this achievement was added via DLC, and there isn't much else to say about it. To me, playing with Vita Chambers off will be practically the same experience, and potentially less of a jarring one. This is at best a C tier achievement to get. And that completes our journey with Bioshock, a great game with some weird spots. Still one of my favorites, and I loved being able to revisit it. I hope that you enjoyed, and if you did, do all that YouTube stuff, like, comment, subscribe. I do plan on making more of these soon enough, and will most likely be covering Dishonored next. Goodbye for now.